welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm the host, Cesky, and today we have the Solution,
Hey everyone.
and we also have Eradandis here with us.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about the second book in the Cradle series, Soulsmith. So, first off, how did you guys like it? Was it better than the first, about the same as the first, worse than the first? What are your feelings on it?
Soul, you want to go first?
Sure. Out of the I think 8 released currently, this is actually my least favorite book, and I'm sure we'll talk about why later. But it's still, a progression from the first, and we see more of the story develop. So that's always something for me. But yeah. What about you, Eridandus?
I am so happy you said that, so I didn't come across as a curmudgeon to start off the bat. I like this book significantly less than the first one, for a variety of reasons. One, the most glaring thing to me is that it's definitely choppier. Like in terms of writing style, it jumps around without a good flow. Unlike the first book, which, say what you want about the first book, it has a good flow to it, and everything connects well. And I did not get that same feeling in this book.
Mhm.
I don't think I actually dislike it more than the other ones. It does have a little bit of a different feel right after coming off that first one. I can definitely see what you're saying there, Dandis, that it does feel a bit choppier. There's more kind of just cuts to it, it feels like. But I think this is kind of the after this one is where it starts getting even better. So, oh,
And
that's just my thought.
can I make a world building point about this, because I kind of
Yeah.
felt this a little bit in the first book, and this time I like pretty much it was crystallized in this book.
Hmm.
You guys are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons alignments, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay, this is a world of lawful evil people, and our protagonist is neutral good. That's what I walked away from this book. Everybody is like looking out for themselves within a certain structure, and they will mow over everybody. And the crystallizing moment for me was when we briefly had a point of view of a character that was a companion to our protagonist. And she's like, well, he's useful to me for now. We'll see what happens later. And that was that crystallizing moment for me of, oh, wait, I thought you guys were buddies by the end of it. I didn't know if you guys had different thoughts on that.
I don't think they're necessarily much different. I would say that as a whole, the world leans a lot more towards that lawful evil, like you're suggesting. I wouldn't
Hmm.
say that everybody besides our main character is that, but definitely a majority. And then I think as we get deeper in, we'll see more alignments of people we know change. So, but that's a good point. It does feel that way. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Uh, Very similar. I think until we get to know these characters a little better, like this is really the first book you really got to know Euron, and you're really just introduced to Ethan, however you say his name. They get more character development in the later books now that they're a group, and until then, it will still feel like lawful evil, like in this book. I think that's one of the reasons actually I still don't like this book the most is because of that reason.
The title of this book was Soulsmith. How did you guys feel that the title of this book compared to the title of Unsold? Just in terms of relevance to like the actual story, where in the first book it's unsold, and Lyndon is unsold, and we kind of learn about that. Versus this book, what did you guys feel? Did it make sense? Did it not make sense?
Well, I would say it made sense because it was an indicator of the path he wanted to end up. He basically ended up choosing by the end of the book within his path of twin stars, because he picks up the bad. So, in that context, it made sense. Where it didn't make sense, at least to me, was I left the end of this book with a very poor understanding. What the hell is soul smithing? I mean, I get like the general concept, but like there's really very little explanation of how the mechanics of it are supposed to work in world. And normally that doesn't bother me. I'm a soft magic kind of guy. But
Hmm.
in the context of a world that's supposed to be a hard magic kind of thing, I was expecting more. And so I don't know whether we were going to get more or whether it was intended to be like that.
I guess I'll say that I agree with you. And soulsmithing is something that Lyndon is like to me. It's his hobby or his main. I don't want to say it's his main goal because he wants to be powerful. So, but I never really connected with the soulsmithing, and it kind of confused me as well. So I didn't really like those parts. And when the entire book is called Soulsmith, it's going to be one of my least favorites for many reasons. That's all another one of them. Um, it doesn't. I mean, it also it comes in later in the books, and but it's not as prevalent as I thought it would be after reading this book.
Personally, I thought it was mostly explained with a few hints of like, well, it never goes quite exactly how you're thinking. But the title for me, like you guys said, you really think that soul smithing is going to be maybe a huge part of this book, and it's not. There's a majority of things that it can kind of influence or like the way it goes, what his actions take all kind of relate to soul smithing, at least in the first half to two-thirds of the book. But then I think
Hmm.
after that, it really changes into something else. So no worries. I just wanted to kind of see what
Yeah.
your guys' thoughts on the title were. So let's talk about kind of just in general, what were some of your guys' favorite scenes, least favorite scenes? Just as a small recap, I'll give you guys. Lyndon and Yeren have escaped Sacred Valley. They are fleeing. They come across some ruins. They investigate the ruins. They work with some the fishers against the sand vipers. They explore the ruins. They meet Ethan, which I just call him Ethan, even though he has an I in his name because that's too difficult to try and come up with another pronunciation for it. They fight, they grow, and then they leave. So, favorite scenes or least favorite scenes? Solution. What's one of yours?
Uh, Now that I've read the other books, I think my favorite is the introduction of Ethan. And at first, I didn't like that when I first read this book, but now it's becoming one of my favorite scenes.
Eradandis, what about you?
Can I give a two scene combo? Because I think
Mm.
when they're put in context, that was my favorite scene because it gives you context as to what happens to Lyndon.
Of course you
Um,
can.
so Lyndon basically is bitten by five sand vipers to get to his iron body, um, and borderline dies. And then Ethan makes a comment of, "Wow, a flawless iron body," something like that, or words to that effect. Um,
Hmm.
and then within a couple scenes, you see an 8-year-old getting ready to do his iron body, and he's given a drop or two drops of venom, and then one or two drops of blood. So, and that was going to be sufficient to get him, this 8-year-old, to an iron body. Whereas Lyndon basically had five sane vipers worth of like complete venom in his transformation. So that kind of gives you context of the scale of the difference of like what Lyndon's iron body would be compared to what a typical sand viper's would be. I like that contrast.
That was a great scene. I felt where you're reading Lyndon's perspective going through this horrible like trial for advancement, and then you're flipping to the Sand Vipers who use the same kind of trial, but on a much lesser scale. It was just very
Yeah.
powerful, I felt.
Yeah,
So
I
what do you
agree.
think, Chesky? What was yours?
One of my favorites, thanks for asking, is it's kind of right before that scene you were just talking about, Erdandis, where uh he's met up with Ethan and Yaren inside the ruins, and then Ethan tricks him into going into his own room and then locks him in there. And he says, and yeah, he's like, "Hey, you gotta help me. I can't do anything. Like because he's so used to being this low-born, no strength, no ability kind of person that he's always had to rely on other people to protect him. Now, granted, even in the last book, he's you know taken some actions on his own, but like he's never really internalized that like he can do it. And so when he's locked in that room with those dangerous creatures, he actually has to fight and kill to protect himself, and that kind of helps him realize like, hey, I can do this. I am not as weak as I've always been told. Just
Hmm.
it's a continuation of that theme that he's never been strong enough and he'll never be strong enough, kind of being broken. And now he can see it for himself. Oh, it wasn't just a lucky accident. It wasn't just a fluke. He did it intentionally and on purpose. So that's one of
That's a
my
good one.
favorites. Yeah.
That's a good one. I would say though, since we're talking about favorite, I think my least favorite is not a particular scene. I would say
Mhm.
it's more of the setup. Um, I I think, and I'm gonna put thinking quotes because I've not read ahead. Um, I think that we're not supposed to like Jai Long, the antagonist of the book, and actually I kind of thought he was okay. I mean, I sympathized with his plight and um, I kind of understood what his motivations and his goals were. So, I mean, I kind of felt like, you know what? If you want me to think he's a bad guy, utter failure. If you're kind of wanting me to think of he's going to stand on an opposite pole of Lyndon, okay, well, I can see that. So, um, I'm not sure what the goal is right now with Jai Long, if he's supposed to actually be bad guy, because I don't really see him doing any quote bad actions. Not at least not in the context of this world.
I think definitely in this book he does have more of an antagonist, like enemy kind of feel, and
Hmm.
I think that's definitely going to change in later books. But he still maintains his, like you said, a kind of opposite poles for Lyndon. But that actually leads me into one of our next questions here. Jai Long, he basically is our antagonist. How did you feel about the betrayal of his family or his family situation where he was groomed to be basically the next head? He was given all the help he needed to grow stronger because of his, aptitude. And then in protecting his sister, he ends up absorbing a remnant of a slightly different path. And that causes all sorts of things to go wrong. He's still incredibly powerful, but instead of his family showing him compassion or help at all, they basically just kick him out and make him leave him for himself. How would you feel
No,
about kind of that situation?
So you want to take that one first? You want me to?
I'll go. So I do agree with what Eradandis said before, and at this point, you really don't see Jai Long doing anything wrong. Like, you think he could actually be the protagonist of his own book, which is totally fine because he's not even really influencing Lyndon at all until the very end. So, I guess spoilers for the book from here on. But when he is killing his buddy, that's the first time you're like, okay, well, your buddy picked on him, and then, okay, so that's where the lawful evil comes in. But other than that, Jay Long did nothing wrong. So, I couldn't really, I mean, I see him as an antagonist, but definitely not like someone evil towards Lyndon specifically.
I would say he was a creature of his upbringing. Um, his clan acted completely in accord with what I earlier said. His clan acted lawful evil. Oh wow, you don't, and in this sense, more on the lawful end than the evil end. Um, you didn't act in conformity with our rigid structure. You did not absorb the correct remnant. Therefore, you are out. I mean, that's the only thing they're looking at. And so, to the author's credit, he then gives Jailong now a good motivation to continue onward, namely to protect his sister, which I actually like that touch because it gives him a sympathetic motivation. Um, but I guess to push back a little bit against Soul, it's not exactly like the guy who's pure as driven snow. I mean, he basically murders a slave or slash minor to motivate everybody else to work. So I'm not sitting here around. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying that Gaelung is the best guy in the world, but he's no better or worse than anybody else we see in the book, at least to date, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You're right. I forgot that. Sorry. So I did skim a little bit, and I missed that scene again. So I forgot it. Yeah.
That is one of my kind of Jai Long as his the antagonist. You're right. He's never pure as snow, but he's also not like distinctly evil. Like I'm just going to kill everybody that I can just because he is that lawful evil for sure. But one of my least favorite stages, just or scenes, is Lyndon's plan to free the slaves. I feel like that was super ill-conceived, and just like I saw these slaves and I had a plan, and I'm just decided we gotta go free them, and like let's talk about it for 3 days, and then let's try it. And it was like, really, like that's your plan? Just like 3 days worth of talking about it? Okay, but furthers the story. It's just like that's an odd choice to make. Why'd you do that?
Well, yeah, I think the author, I personally, the author had to put it in there to kind of go, hey, look, Lyndon's a good guy. That was the purpose of putting the free the slaves moment. But I agree with you. It's like, really?
Yeah, he is like our good character. You could say that he's one of the few with an alignment of good. His reason for getting stronger that we know is to stop the dread beasts from destroying his home at Sacred
Hmm.
Valley. Now, does that excuse everything that he might be doing or might end up doing? Does the ends outweigh the means? I guess we'll have to talk about it later when he actually gets that power and we can kind of see all of his actions at once. But so far, I don't think he's done anything too unrealistic or too like evil to say, for his actions. So,
Okay, can I ask a question? Because it has to do with, I guess, I'm going to call it the magic system or the leveling system, maybe is the best way to say it.
uh huh.
Um, uh, this was my impression, and maybe it's an incorrect impression, so maybe you can let me know. It kind of feels like, okay, there's a big difference, obviously, between being unsold and copper, and then there's a big difference between being copper and iron. And then from iron to gold, there's an even bigger gap. And then basically going through the stages of gold, there's a bigger gap in between each of those. So am I correct in thinking that basically each step up, there's an even vaster gulf between you and the previous level you were at? Does that make sense?
Without spoilers, yes and no. Like
Okay.
you're nearing what you know so far in these books. You're nearing the end of uh, physical differences. I mean, you're still going to get a lot of progression. That's a part that's
Mhm.
the stage of advancement in themselves. But you're getting close to where you're stopping the. You can see farther, or you can do certain things that are an entirely new world to them, like their
Right.
sight of the magical auras and things like that. You're nearing the end of that soonish. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's all I want to really say. Without the next book, we could talk about that a lot more.
No, that's fine. And the reason I asked that for, I guess, a couple reasons, because one of the things. So again, the thing I grabbed a hold of in this book is the magic system itself, because
Mhm.
that to me was the most interesting part of the book. Um, so what I like was two things. One, how in the first book you were copper, you were iron, you were jade, etc. And in this book, it was, well, what kind of copper were you? What kind of iron are you? What kind of gold are you? Right? There's different
Mhm.
gradations of within each level, which that was developed, which I like. And then the displays of power from Ethan versus the golds and the golds versus each other and the golds versus the iron. That was definitely shown, and that's where I was getting the impression of, oh wait, if you're is it Underlord? I forget it.
Yes.
If you're an Underlord, you are like basically goals. You don't even have to worry about them, and kind of that progression kind of onward. Anyways, I didn't know what you guys' thoughts were. You've read it, so
No, I think that's a great analysis of it. Like it's every I think the first 2 or 3 levels are kind of the most inconsequential, from unsold to copper, copper to iron is where you're going to see the first big difference. And then I think, like you said, they do start expanding the gap between them with every level. But what I liked about this one is that you're given, okay, so you're jade, and then you have to go to gold, but instead of just being gold as one, and you have to work 4 times as hard to get to the next level. You have low gold, true gold, high gold. Kind of just that breaking up of a really long, tough process into smaller, easier bites, which is something that we as people do all the time for everything. So it totally made
Hmm.
sense to me that they were like, yeah, we're going to take gold, which is this really big level, and we're just going to cut it in 3 pieces. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I gotta say, in relation to the first book, how isolated was Lyndon's village? I mean, seriously, it was like must have been super duper isolated. So, because when he takes 2 steps out, like everybody's a gold or everybody's an iron, it's like it's no big deal, right? So,
Hmm.
yep. And we will potentially learn more about that later on. I know you learn a little bit, and hopefully we learn even more after more books are written, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
Definitely, his questions will be answered, but it may be another book or two, I think, before they're
Yeah.
even hinted at, and then before they're fully confirmed.
gotcha.
All right. Oh, there was the common trope after near the end of the book where Jailong wants to kill Lyndon because Lyndon killed his friend that took him in, and they agree to duel an opponent in a year. A little bit of a common trope there, but what was your feelings on it? Did it feel like it fit the story? Did it not fit the story? What are your thoughts, Eradandis?
I mean, a book like this has to have that trope. If it didn't have that trope, I would have been disappointed. I mean, uh, it's like you read books for different reasons. And look, I'm not, full disclosure, I'm not like looking to get anything super deep out of these books. I'm looking for a fun story, right? So if I'm going to have a fun story, I need the duel. I mean, it's pretty much that simple, right? And I got it, and I'm glad that it's with the character it is because um, at least there's a contrast there.
Perfect. Yeah. Soul, what about you? You enjoyed the trope?
No, yeah, I like the trope. I think it's funny. I think the way even Ethan he framed it was hilarious too. In the moment, he's like, "Why don't you just duel him like a year? How about that? Like instead of killing him now, you can kill him in a year." Okay, so felt a little goofy to have that thrown in, but it was still, character development for Ethan because that's just the way he is, and I thought it's a cool thing to look forward to in a year for the structure of the next book.
And by the way, okay, can we talk about Ethan for a second?
Hmm.
Sure.
Okay. Like I don't know what we're. I don't know. Not having read forward, obviously, and again, this is just me reading it from book two. Um, I'm not sure what we're supposed to think of Ethan, right? I mean, on the one hand, he's you know, happy-go-lucky-ish kind of slash comic relief, but at the same time, like super extra deadly, right? And at least for me, I was left with the impression that and he has this radical sense of self-sufficiency, like this completely radical sense of self-sufficiency. Basically, if you can't take care of yourself, no matter what the circumstances are, you're not worth it to me. And he kind of either acted that way or said that outright several times throughout the book, which really left me with the impression of, yeah, I hope that our protagonists, Lyndon and Yaren, are going into Black Flame with the expectation of Ethan will be their buddies and help them to the exact extent that they can advance his plans and no further. So that was what I was left with. So
No, he does come off very, very kind of carefree or devil may care. Like, I don't care what anybody does. I know that he knows that he's kind of above everything, and that if he wanted, he could kind of just like wipe out everybody in the ruins. He doesn't want to though because that's a hassle, right? He's kind of got that attitude. But
Hmm.
it's I think we're meant to kind of see him as both a pro and a con for our protagonists, Yaren and Lyndon. Just like you're saying, Ardandis, that his goals, and as long as they can further his goals, they're fine. When they stop, I guess we'll have to see. And we do learn, a little more in the next book. But what about you, Soul? Any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, without getting too much into the next books, it's mostly just he's the mysterious, patron, and that's what we're meant to see. I don't think we're meant to really delve into it too much. There's supposed to be some apprehension, with Lyndon going with him, but knowing that he will improve with him regardless.
Well, there's two other quick points I want to make about Ethan. One is I really liked his Madra, the awareness. Like that was to me. I like that more than I can do 20 swords in the air. No, like he knows what's going to happen before it's going to happen, or he's so aware of what's happening that he can take action beforehand. And I think we're going to talk about this. He has a different kind of iron body to suit that ability. So I like that synergy between his body to his power. So I really like that explanation. It wasn't stated expressly, but it was implied. So I like that. So I think that gives us a hint as to what we should expect with Lyndon's body. At least that was the impression I got. That's one. And two, there was a scene expressly shown by the author, which made me think of Hunter x Hunter, or basically any kind of shonen anime where they're kind of running through all these different parts and they're trying to escape. And here's Ethan in the back with it's described with his eyes closed, with his hands behind his back, elbows up in the air. And I mean, you see this in animes all the time where you have just a character kind of whistling in the back, kind of doesn't give a crap in the world, and with his hands up in the air and just kind of goofing off. So, anyways, if that was the visual image you wanted to leave me with, that's exactly what I was left with.
Yeah, I definitely think that's kind of the aim he was going for with Ethan there, just that carefree attitude. So I think
Yeah.
that's right, and I really did like as well the expansion of the magic a little bit. Even though we don't get a ton, we get the next kind of level, but we get, well, here's this iron body that you could do that we could do now, and we kind of get hints that like, oh, well, Yaren had her own iron trial and a different iron body, and maybe Ethan had another one, and there's, how many more could there be, right?
Well, so
Hmm.
let me ask you about that, because Ethan, like we really left the impression of, he has like super hands reflexes and he can kind of move very fast. That was the impression you were left with. And Yaren, at least I was left with the impression of, she's got a really hard, durable, tough body. And with Lyndon, I was left with the impression of Wolverine. Kind of, I can come back from any wound type of thing as long as I have the Madra to cycle. So I'm kind of not sure. I mean, to me, it seems like there's a deliberate thing done by the author where the iron body is supposed to match the future magic you're going to be using.
I definitely agree with you that most of the time your iron body is supposed to match kind of your future style or your future path, where Lyndon has never had a path. Like Yaren, her path has always been to be a sword user. And so her and the Sword Sage, kind of you would expect, kind of picked a path and a sword body, you could say, that matches what she's going to be doing, which is fighting with swords most of the time. Now with Lyndon, his was kind of like, well, we have to rush you, but we're gonna try and pick the best one we can. Here's a very generic, good iron body. Was my feel. Now I think it works because he's going to
Hmm.
be struggling and fighting a lot, and that healing is never going to be a bad side. So, what about you, Solution? Do you have kind of the same thoughts or different?
Similar. I think even though in the moment it felt like, yeah, this is just the best iron body we could do. He was doing this. Yuka's intentions, as far as Lyndon knows, kind of like a universal, that whatever path he decides to go on or whatever, it's just on off to. I thought that was just cool. And
Okay, now I know, Eradandis, you've been really itching to talk about our space doctor. What did you feel about our space doctor, her scenes?
Her scene? You mean
Her
her
scene. I
scene?
guess she does only have the one or Did you have two in this one or just one?
Yes. Yeah.
I think there was just one.
All right.
Well, and I presume, I mean, I don't know yet, but I presume that she's the one that's accessing the files. Like, so tell me what's going to happen with Jaguar in the future. Tell me what's going to happen with Lyndon in the future. So I'm presuming that's her. But I have no basis for stating that besides just, she's the only one I really know from beyond the world.
That's what I choose to believe as well, because she's the only one who'd have a specific interest in Lyndon's life.
Right.
So, but yeah, what
I
did you think
mean,
about
Mhm.
her culling that whole planet?
I mean, so that tells me that that they're looking. I'm reminded again of Warhammer 40K, which you guys are unfamiliar with. But it reminds me in that world, basically, everything is like, has this rigid order. But then if you break that order, if you fall into chaos, you are, whatever's been touched by chaos has been eradicated mercilessly. So that's the impression I got, is that that world had some kind of, I don't want to call it infection, but some kind of, the term they use is deviation from the plan. And because of that deviation, that planet was entirely eradicated. Kind of like, it became a world full of monsters to these people, so they had to eradicate them by and large. And I want to stay with that word deviation because that was actually brought up towards the end of this book, where they said that Lyndon had a deviation himself from his potential path, which is potential foreshadowing of future conflict with, I guess, future down the line when he finally gets off the world, which I presume will happen at some point.
Yeah, there are, I think, a lot of future plans kind of being laid in those stories. The story with the space doctor, where she deviated Lyndon's path by rescuing him and leaving him with his memories, rather than just letting him live his life again as an unsouled. And yeah, it does kind of remind you of that Warhammer 40K, of which I've read one book. But you have the forces of humanity against chaos, and I feel like it's very apt, like you said, just that there's the way and the path that they kind of protect, and then every so often something happens, another deviation breaks or something, and chaos gets in, or the deviations get in, and then they start just killing. And I really like the second story, where it's it's very minimalistic. This story, that we know Suriel has to go kill this planet. She talks about somebody else used to do it, but they're missing, and we don't know, why they left. We get little bits of hints. I think I remember in this book, we get little tidbits or teases of, well, this is what's happening, and this is another person she has to contend with. But I really enjoy the mystery of not knowing everything, because we know a lot about Lyndon's life and about his story. We learn a ton every book. In this other book, we learn just little hints and tidbits and more and more. So I like that part a lot, though. But Solution, what are your thoughts about Suriel the Space Doctor?
I mean, yeah, you summed up pretty much everything I was going to say. I feel the
Well,
same.
okay, can I give
Yeah.
maybe a not so old manish comp? Maybe like One Punch Man, which I saw with my son. When they eat the fruits to become humans eat those fruits and become monsters from the Monster Association and then change. So once they become monsters, then the heroes go and kill the monsters. That's maybe another comp. This world, or it's like a planet full of people eating those monster seeds, deviating, and then having to be eradicated. So
Okay. Hmm.
I'm trying.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
It's good. It's
There's
good.
nothing
Yeah.
else there. I mean, so Eradandis, do you think that Lyndon will split his core a third time now that he's done it once? Do you think he'll continue to keep splitting it, or is this the end?
At this time I'm gonna have to go with no, because for right now he has one iron body core and one copper core. So I'm actually more interested to see what happens to his iron body when he gets a second iron core. Um, Whether there will be basically a layered effect. In other words, will he have double the ability or not? So I'm actually more interested to see is what's going to happen with his current abilities once he advances the second core up to equal equivalent levels to his first core. And
Okay.
I do have a question because this is driving me crazy. And I mentioned to Soulution beforehand.
hmm
Um, okay, I'm going to ask this to you directly, Cesky.
Yeah.
What the hell, Sword Sage? That's no. I mean, just no. I mean, that makes no sense.
What part of the Sword Sage makes no sense? That you have no idea where his level fits in, or you have no idea what a Sword Sage is?
No, so you're at least given the impression that the Sword Sage is equivalent to or beyond Ethan. How the hell does he die
Mm-hmm.
in the first book?
I don't know, but I kind of know. But I can't spoil it for you until you get to about book 7, which is
Well,
Yes. Yes.
where you learn a little
here's
bit more.
Mm-hmm.
well, here's my pet theory. My pet theory,
Uh-huh.
the only thing that I think makes sense is that he essentially committed a form of suicide to advance Yiren further down her path at some point. Nothing else makes sense because given what we now know about the different levels and the gulf between the levels, like the everybody in Lyndon's Village put together couldn't do anything to the Sword Sage at any point under any circumstances ever.
Yep. If he is anything even remotely above gold, then you are correct that the Sacred Valley artists who have a maximum of jade would truly never be
Mm-hmm.
able to hurt him. But I don't want to. I don't want to say anything
Yeah.
for fear
There's
of
nothing we really
spoiling
can
your
say.
attitude. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
towards
at the
him.
time when I only read this book, I assumed the same thoughts, and I thought maybe poison. I I want to say I was thinking maybe poison because they mentioned the poison. Maybe there was like a special poison that they made because I just didn't understand how it was possible. And Jessica, have you read the last book?
I've read 1 through 7, but I've been putting off book 8 just until I do another reread for all of it, which
Okay.
is what we're doing. So
Okay, then yeah. So you just need to read, and you especially you'll enjoy as far as what's this referred to in the last book.
it is, yeah. That was actually going to be one of my questions there, Andis. I was going to ask you is we've seen more leveling, and how did you feel about the Sword Sage dying to Jades? But
I'm choosing to say that he did it for a reason and that he didn't just say, crap, I want to get my first book out and hope it's successful.
well,
No,
I
there's a
think
reason.
you'll appreciate the foresight he had when writing this book. Um,
Hmm.
so actually, this is a little bit somewhat off topic. I read recently that the author of this, Will White, I think is this author. Maybe it was the other author, Andrew Rowe, but
Hmm.
basically he was saying that with his stories, he's advanced the world so much that it's too tough for him to like remember everything in between his own books and make sure everything is the continuity is 100% right. And so he was taking
Hmm.
like a month or two off writing to straighten it all out in his head and make sure it worked. So I thought
He
that was a
is,
good
and
idea, no matter
yeah,
what book you're writing, to do that.
Well,
So
of course.
I'll say this, that that's always one of the dangers of doing a hard magic system is that you better make sure you have everything lined up because people are going to go through it and kind of go, hey, you said this, then that happened. So what's the explanation? So um, one of the reasons I like soft magic a little bit more, just you don't need to explain it.
I definitely see that appeal of the soft magic. I just really like knowing, like, even if it's just like major limits, like you can do anything in this kind of umbrella, but you can't use it to just magically solve every problem, which I guess is probably more of just like a good book versus a bad book kind of a story. But
That's true.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean, right?
Hmm.
I completely understand what you mean. I guess I'll put it this way, we live in a world of science and physics and technology, right? So I feel a little bit when I'm reading a hard magic system of we're going to try to put our rational minds and we're going to create a scientific kind of based magic system using our rational minds. And just a fundamental philosophical point, magic is supposed to be irrational. That's why it's called magic. So that's why I tend towards the soft magic. But I understand the appeal of hard magic, but that's kind of, and to that point, that's what I'm taking out of these books as enjoyment, right? Is that he's creating a complex, consistent magic system and kind of taking us on that journey with the character on that magic system.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we're getting a little close to the end here, but I did have another question I wanted to ask.
Uh-oh.
I guess this is specifically for you, Era, because Soulution already knows, but we'll get his take on it here too. Near the end of the book, Ethan is talking to Yaren and saying, "Hey, you guys are coming with me. I think Lyndon's going to be great. He's going to work hard. I can tell. You got to work hard, and you have to deal with your unwelcome guest."
Yep.
What do you think that is referring to, or what do you think about that? Like,
So obviously it's the I'm called the rope or the red sash that she carries around with her. I mean, it's very obviously that. As to what it is, given that it's red, that's an indicator that it's something to do with blood. She's on the sword path, so maybe it's an impression of like something that steals victims' souls or victims' madra, something like that. I mean, a la a Stormbringer from Elric of Melibone, or something like that. In other words, an evil demon or daemon or evil remnant kind of trapped in it, which she has to somehow come to terms with or absorb or control to gain another level of power.
great solution.
Well, when I first read this book, I had no idea. And the next book was out. So I didn't actually think about it too much. I just immediately went right into the next book, and then that was it. So,
Without confirming or denying your analysis, I think your analysis was analysed very greatly. Yeah,
mhm.
I think you did just an A+ job looking at all the pieces and putting together what you know into a reasonable thought. So A+ for you there. I'd give you double A+ if I could, but I'm sorry, that's not possible.
It's funny. A plus, you got it wrong, but A plus analysis. So no,
Well,
just kidding.
I didn't say you had it wrong. I
We
said
didn't say.
without
No,
confirming
no.
or denying.
Correct. We
I
can't
know. I
confirm.
know.
So,
Yeah.
I know. No.
So, was there anything that you guys really wanted to bring up that we didn't talk about already? Any scenes that you really liked? Any stories or feelings you had while reading it that you want to cover again?
no, we talked about everything. The main two I wanted to ask was, yeah, how did a bunch of Jades kill the sage? Which is a question that pops up a lot on the subreddit. And then Lyndon splitting his core again. Those were some subreddit jokes that just pop up all the time.
I would say, this still isn't the books for me, but I understand the appeal. Let me make that clear. I understand the appeal, and I'm kind of reading these books in the context of if I was a new reader again, how would I feel about these books? Or if my son or daughter started reading these books and were excited about it, like why would they be excited about it? So I'm actually enjoying the books from that perspective. I really am. So anyway, so when I want to decompress from a hard day, these are actually nice books to kind of like read, turn your mind off, and just enjoy. So I'm looking forward to more books like that. Okay.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. They are fun, simple books, and at least you're getting the enjoyment out of them. It's not the deep thinking enjoyment that you can get from books, but it is a simple kind of not pure enjoyment, but more pure enjoyment out of it.
Pure Madra.
Pure Madra. Yep.
Yep, that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks you guys for talking about the second book in the Cradle series with me, Soulsmith. I enjoyed it. It sounds like you guys enjoyed it. But again, thanks Soulution and thanks Eradandis for joining us. And that's going to wrap up our discussion of Soulsmith. Thanks, of course, to Legendarium for kind of starting their own podcast and allowing us to start off a spin-off podcast. if you want to support the Legendarium or join them, you can always connect on Discord or Reddit or Twitter. Craig's been very active there. So come join us
Join
and
and
have a
become
good time.
patrons.
Yes, join in the conversation, as they always say.